There are four huge issues in marriage that account for most of the reasons that couples get divorced. Those issues are your spiritual life, kids and parenting, handling money, and sex. We can even make them all start with the letter F: faith, family, finances, and sex. If you can figure out how to create unity on these four issues, you can basically divorce-proof your marriage. Today, I talked to a couple about how they have navigated these core issues and, in essence, made their marriage divorce-proof while creating a marriage that they love. Welcome to the Christian Marriage Podcast, the only podcast on the entire internet about Christian marriage that I host. I'm Nick. I'm a Christian marriage coach. And on this podcast, I talk with couples who have been recommended to me as having Christian marriages full of love and wisdom. We talk about how they made it through hard things in their marriage. And we tell these stories so that you can have great examples of how real couples made it through this crazy thing called marriage. And so that you can build a life-giving marriage for you and your spouse. So let me introduce you to Damon and Andy. They're from Blacksburg, Virginia. They've been married for 33 years. And one quick note about Damon and Andy is when I was talking with them about doing an episode of the podcast, they sort of struggled to come up with what they would talk about on the podcast because they didn't really think that they had many, hard things that happened in the course of their marriage. But as we talked more, it turns out that Damon's mom died early-ish into their marriage. They had been in the Navy and had moved a lot. They had multiple miscarriages, and one of their sons is autistic. But they had been able to navigate all of these things with such unity and strength that none of these things even sort of popped up into their minds as something that was hard. It goes to show the quality of the connection that they have been able to build. So I think that you will want to pay attention to this godly couple and learn whatever you can. So some principles that stuck out to me about my conversation with Damon and Andy. Number one is they talk about kind of those big four that we talked about, but they kept coming back to communication. And I was able to ask them I think a really interesting question about how does faith in Christ affect how you communicate? And I love their answer that they basically said, when you give your life to Christ and try to become like him, you become more loving. You become more loving. And that translates into how you communicate. You can start to communicate in a way that is filled with love and patience and the fruit of the Spirit instead of stress and anger and defensiveness. Giving your life to Christ changes you so you can communicate in a more loving way. I thought that was a great answer. It really shows the power of living out your faith. Now, you do need a heart of love to communicate well, but it's also really helpful to have those hard skills of communication. So if your marriage communication is not feeling super great these days, it could be because you are making some simple mistakes that make everything worse. So I have a gift that I want to give you that can help with that. It's called the 7 Deadly Sins of Marriage Communication. In it, I will help you identify the most common marriage communication mistakes that people make and give you an idea of how to solve that mistake so that you can build more peace and more connection into your marriage instead of tension and distance. So get your copy of The 7 Deadly Sins of Marriage Communication so that you can help start divorce proofing your marriage today. There's a link in the description. Okay, second principle that we talked about was how to live out your faith together. And one of the most important things that they talked about that I thought was so practical is dive deep into church. Go to church together, be in a small group, seek to serve. Don't just do church, but dive into church and the connection and the relationships and the spiritual formation of growing in Christ together through the body of a church greatly benefited their marriage in some very practical ways, as they will talk about. I know that maybe it seems like you can't really imagine how going to church could help your marriage all that much. It's one of those things that it doesn't really make a ton of sense. I get it when you're sort of struggling to make it to church or struggling to connect with a small group regularly. I get it. There's not like a real tight line that you can draw whenever you're not already in it. But I want to emphasize that over and over and over again in these episodes that I talk with couples about, involvement in a church is something that almost every couple has mentioned at some point. It's important. It makes a very practical difference in your marriage. We need to take it seriously. And then the third principle, we talked about family, parenting and kids. And one of the foundational truths that their involvement with church helped them form was that they are two people who become one. That's what marriage is. It is not two people sort of living life together, but it is that two people become one. And that idea, that teaching, and figuring out how do we live out that truth together helped them make it through some division whenever it came to their raising their kids. So I want to emphasize that these foundational truths matter for how you walk through your marriage. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Living out your faith changes the way that you are married. It makes marriage better. Jesus told us that he came so that we can have life and have it abundantly. And if you want a great marriage, part of what you need to do is actually focus less on having a great marriage and focus more on Jesus and on receiving the abundant life that he gave you. He gives you things like forgiveness, grace, gentleness, love, power, and he transforms you into a person who can give these things to your spouse. So if you want to have a great marriage, focus on living out your faith in Christ. All the way at the end of the episode, we also kind of touch on finances. We were sort of running out of time, but we also talk a little more in-depthly about sex. So that's at the end. Stick around for that. I think this was a great and very practical episode with Damon and Andy. So I really hope that you will find it helpful. If you do find it helpful, will you please leave a 5-star review on the platform that you're listening to this on? And also, let me know in the comments, what are you struggling with in your marriage? You don't have to be super specific, be as specific as you want, but maybe I can make some content that can answer some questions that you would have about marriage. So let me know, what are you struggling with most in your marriage? I'd love to be as helpful as I can. And now here's my conversation with Damon and Andy. Damon and Andy, thank you so much for joining me on the Christian Marriage Podcast. I'm really excited to have you guys with me. And we are talking about some really important topics today. You wanted to talk about sort of the top key problems that you see in couples that they struggle with that can make marriage feel really hard and bad, and sort of how you have navigated those, right? So I think this is going to be really good, really practical, and I'm excited to dive in. So thanks for being with me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have a sort of the big four struggles that couples have. And a lot of these, I actually looked up the top reasons for divorce that are cited in the United States, and all of these are on there. And so we're going to be talking about those. What's the list that you have to talk about?
Yeah. So again, we're grateful to be here, and we are here to help. This is not as if we have reached any sort of mastery in any of this sort of stuff, but it's more of what we've discovered. And, as you said, it's no rocket science. It's nothing hidden. It's
documented.
It's documented that the big things that couples struggle with right out of the gate, and when they get to our point, 33 years of marriage, what do you know? We're still struggling with the same challenges. And there are four. It's usually over faith. It's also over family. It's over finances. And it's through intimacy. Those four things tend to be the big things that just seem to crop up early on. And so,
I guess some of I was trying to find another F to go with it, but fornication doesn't really apply.
PG-13 here.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I know.
right.
Hey, but
No.
we'll keep it on the up and up.
I didn't even think about that one, but that I guess that would count.
Real godly.
Keep it PG-13. That's good.
But those four things are the main things that when we go into marriage, we just figure this will all work itself out. And we've actually heard people say that, like, we'll figure it out.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
We'll cross that bridge when it comes. And then when the bridge does come and one person's ready to go over and the other person's like, I'm not going over that bridge. Yeah. And you're like, wait, what just happened here?
This isn't what I signed up for. Nobody said anything about going over a bridge.
I assumed that you would. And so, kind of right off the bat, we can find that, it really all boils down to communication, but we don't want to get like super generalized. So in these 3-4 topics, just we can unpack that a little bit. And I would just say, look, for our listeners or people that are watching, you might be, hey, I'm trying to get ahead of the class and I'm like looking into marriage. We're getting married. Hey, let's watch this podcast about this couple talking about the 4 things we need to be aware of. These are things like you really got to talk about these things before you say I do. And frankly, even before you say I will in terms of engagement, because once you say I will, you're kind of already there.
It's hard to
reverse that train. So choosing well is good, but then like, okay, our group here is mainly like, hey, I've been married for, 5 years and what is like holding us up? And so let's break it down. It's probably one of these 4 things.
Yeah.
So what do I do? Like we're struggling with one of those or all 4 of those. And
right.
So that's where we want to unpack today.
Right. And you said that so there's the top 4, and then you're saying that a lot of this also, though, like almost topic 0 is communication is part of what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Because I think you said
a job of talking as it is, and we're all sharing the same language, and yet
unbelievable
all these things in our favor, books and podcasts on how to communicate, we still have a hard time with that. So let's just start at the very beginning and just say, look, gospel peace. Like we all are broken because of sin. Thank goodness for Jesus. He has rescued us from that. And now we get the chance to walk in a new way through his spirit in us that we can communicate to one another with some help. So
Yeah.
something's broken, but we're still kind of in this middle ground of like, I'm broken, but I've got some hope because of Jesus. So let's just establish that. But yeah, communication is the key. So at the top of every one of them is going to be, well, how are we doing with
Are we
communication?
communicating?
We'll just
Let
put
me,
that, as you said, 0, and then let's go down each of these lines.
yeah, for sure. So let's go back to that gospel piece. So it would be easy, I think, to get to sort of okay, you have the gospel and your belief in God and everything like that, and then you have something like like a hard skill like communicating. For you, how does okay we are sinful and need Christ, and Christ met our need. How does that translate into helping you? How did that work for you two? That the gospel and what Jesus did for you helped you become better communicators.
Hmm. Well, it was definitely a process of maturity for sure. I think we, in the beginning, in the early days, it was harder just because you have to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to talk about the hard things when you're dating and engaged, and it's all happy and, you know, just the excited feelings, and then real life sets in, and you start to annoy each other, and you don't know how to communicate that. And so you have to learn how to do it in a way that's not hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think just growing in maturity of your relationship with the Lord then teaches you how to communicate in love and not in anger.
Yeah.
And, if you can come at it from an attitude of love and wanting to help the relationship and not hurt it, then that makes all the difference. Like if you can explain how you feel in a way that's not um, blaming,
Yeah.
I feel this way because of you, because you're, that sort of thing, then
Yes.
that certainly makes it easier.
For sure. Okay, so I think you're saying that as you become more mature in the gospel, that you become more loving, and that translates into even the way that you talk to each other. Is
Absolutely.
that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and this is literally learned like yesterday. I mean, we're in a constant state of
Yes.
choices of, am I going to respond in a way that is by God's spirit in me, or am I going to do this according to, my flesh, who I was kind of downloaded with upon birth?
Mm-hmm.
We get a choice. Like
Wow.
every day, I get a choice. Now, when you start to string together in maturity, like, wow, okay, I really, Christ in me enables me to be patient, to be loving, to be joyful, to be kind. Those are fruits of the spirit. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I can really see some momentum, some maturity happening. But when I choose to walk by my former self, anger, stress, stressors,
Yeah.
discord, unkindness, like, wow, I can string that together pretty well too. And so even though with time, like, hey, we've been married 33 years, we could totally leave this podcast and like go into total non-communication mode,
Yeah.
pull out one of the 4 challenges and game on. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, you never reach a level of maturity of mastery per se, but you just grow in that whole sense of maturity. Like you realize I have agency. I have a choice because of the
Wow.
gospel in me.
Yeah.
I know for me for a while, I think especially in the midst of young kids, um, when you're in the circumstances of this is so hard and exhausting, and this is what I wanted, but it's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, it's like I felt like because this is hard and stressful, I have the right because I feel bad to be unkind.
Mm-hmm.
And then in growing in maturity, realizing, oh no, that's actually not right. Like that's sin. Like I
Right.
do not have that right. I have the ability because of the Lord to rise above that and be like, this is really hard, but that doesn't mean I can't be loving and kind and considerate of someone else, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was
And
one
that's
of
not,
those.
and that's
one
not
of
just
those
stuffing it either.
no, but definitely one of those
Mm.
realizations that slaps you in the face and goes, okay, this is how you've been living, and this is not right. This is something that needs to be, repented of and moved on and change your attitude, sort of thing. So that's a
Yeah,
big deal.
that's really interesting that there is also a difference between like just stuffing your feelings down and lovingly communicating them. Yeah, and dealing with your feelings of entitlement or unfairness or whatever. Like it's not just not feeling them, but it's actually actively processing them according to, well, he got treated unfairly, and how did he respond? And now he empowers me to respond in a loving way, just like he did, I think is what you're saying. Yeah. No, it's good.
But what just rose to the top? You almost said it just rose to the top. Communication.
Yeah,
Buoy
right.
pops up
Right.
again, like, hey, remember
Yes.
communication, like, in that piece. And so, through as we have gone through, and again, it'll probably happen this afternoon, like the need to, like, hey, I'm feeling this way, or this is how I experienced that, or what's your vision for that? Like,
For
how
sure.
can we move forward for that? Like,
Yeah.
and it just again goes down those four paths usually.
Yeah. And that's so important. So I think what I'm taking away from this communication piece is God empowers us to go from a place of where we are not as loving as we need to be, and we don't communicate as people who are filled with love, to people who are transformed in Christ, who are becoming people of love, and who can speak to each other in a way that shows that we have become people of love. I think is like what I'm taking away from this, right?
Right.
Cool. Okay, so that was number 0, and you're saying that like all of these other 4, you have to be able to communicate as people of love, and that will make all of the rest of these 4 either easier if you can do that, or a lot harder if you don't have that heart of love and these communication skills to like use it. So okay, so the big 4, what is your number 1?
Oh, that people most struggle with?
Well, what's the first one?
Yeah. So let's want to say go easiest to hardest, but like everyone's got. I mean, if you get 100 people, like, hey, rank these. Like everyone's got.
Everybody's a little different, right?
We'll start with faith. And again, there's the before premarital, and then there's the marital. Again, assumptions. We'll figure it out. I'm sure she'll catch on board. He'll catch on board. But okay, let's just say here we are now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could have differing levels of engagement where you're like, hey, it's Sunday, it's beautiful, I want to go play golf. And you're like, hey, it's Sunday, it's beautiful, we need to quote unquote go to church.
Yeah.
Or hey, why don't we join a small group? Like, I don't like, burying my soul, like where there is just differences.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of, so since our main topic is we're already married, we're about 5 minutes, 5 minutes,
5 minutes into
years
marriage.
That's how
That sounds
long
right.
we go. 5 minutes
Five-
into it.
Yeah.
So, so when it comes to faith, I mean, Andy, what would you say, just in encouraging a couple that might be at different levels of, I'll just say engagement during their walk with the Lord?
I just think that's so hard to be that far in. It's one of those that so important to get established before marriage. To know that you're moving in the same direction, on the same page, have the same ideas about what you want it to look like. So yeah, once you're 5 years in and you don't agree, that's
That's a tough spot to be
that's
in.
a
Tough spot.
really, yeah.
Because, matters of faith and the heart are, you know, well, I say they're both very emotional.
Yeah.
Like this is like the most important thing to us in the gospel.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I guess just some real practical thoughts about it. Like, okay, number one, let's talk about it. Communication, zero.
Yes.
But number two, I'll just say the one, there's some clear biblical, and I don't have passages right in front of me, there's just some clear biblical encouragements to say the one who is walking with the Lord is to hang in there, that your consistency and
Mm.
your modeling of what a walk with the Lord looks like blesses your spouse.
Right.
And so as opposed to it all being like, well, I can't grow because you're not growing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's a erroneous pointing of the gun,
Yeah.
the gun that like, okay, I need to my relationship with God is not dependent upon Andrea or Andy.
Yeah.
No, like my
Right.
relationship with God, like I've got to like there is no God has, God has no grandchildren, but God has no, spouses either. It's like, oh wow, I'm just tagging along with her. Thank
Right.
goodness she goes to church and has small groups.
Right.
And so, my encouragement to the one who's, kind of the lonely one is to keep modeling Christ and don't stop, and that by your activities you God's grace and his mercy
Mm-hmm.
will draw the other to himself.
Yeah, for sure. Right. How have what has been important in your guys' faith journey together? What have you done that has really helped you draw closer to it? Of course you're saying that picking a partner who has the same value and talking about it beforehand, that was a really vital part of your guys' story. But that's not to say, I'm assuming that's not to say that once you have chosen carefully, it would be easy to not actively walk together also, I think. So for you, what has actively walking together in faith? What are a couple of choices that you feel like have been helpful throughout the years?
I think the importance of a church
Mm-hmm.
body. That's something that we've always placed a high priority on. And when we were first married, we moved several times in the first 7 years. And so Damon was in the Navy, and we knew we would only be a place for a year. But we
Mm-hmm.
knew that year we're going to find a church and get as involved as we can in that year, even though you're going to have to pull up roots.
We totally had an excuse like, let's not bother. I'm saying that could have been an
Yeah,
excuse.
that could have
Yeah.
been. That was
Sure.
very important to us to build community and to have accountability. And so, we've always placed a high importance on that. We've always placed a high importance on going every week.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, if we have to be away for the weekend, if we can come back Saturday night to be there Sunday morning, we try the best. Obviously we miss sometimes.
Not in a legalistic way.
No, not at all.
Not for like, goodness, we got to keep our perfect streak going.
Yeah,
but
just
for like, we need this. Like, this is
Yeah.
important to us, especially now having a family that models like intentionality to our
Mhm.
children. And I'll add, since you said church, I'll add just the incredible importance of a small group. Like, you
Mhm.
should always be in some sort of small group.
especially with a church as big as, our church is really big. And so it's
Yeah.
very easy to sit in the back and not meet people and,
Right.
Check in.
check in. And that's
Yeah.
just that's not church. And we feel very strongly about that people need to know you and you need to know people.
Yeah.
And obviously you can't know everybody, but that's just always been very
Yeah.
important to us and something that we have spent, and we've only been at North Star for just over 2 years, and going from a very small church to a very big church. But like, okay, we're here, we're jumping in, we're
Yeah.
going to get involved and be part of
Right.
making this place work. And so that's something we really enjoy. So
Yeah.
that's not hard for us because we like it. But
Right. Right.
there's always issues when you're dealing with other people.
But it's not like you also didn't make decisions that you wouldn't, like if you were away, well, it'd be nice to just drive back on Sunday morning or something. Like you also built a lot of life maybe around the idea of church involvement. So, okay, yeah, no, I think so. For you, you're saying the thing that jumps straight to mind as being helpful in knitting you together in faith has been, well, we put a high priority not only on attending a church, but seeking to be known, seeking to know others, seeking to serve, and like being involved in a church. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
To add one last thing to
yeah.
it, Nick, is that our Christian culture puts a high priority on personal relationship with God.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, highlight personal.
Yeah.
And so,
Individual. I think you're-
Yes,
absolutely.
individual.
Absolutely. And so, hey, at least I'm doing my own thing. Like, I don't need other people. And that is like
Mhm.
in direct opposition to everything and the whole message of the New Testament, especially as it talks about the church. A lot of us, there's no I,
Mhm.
a lot of we, a lot of do this to one another. Like,
Yeah.
there is no individual, there are no Lone
Right.
Rangers. And so, in marriage and in so, as you notice, we talked a lot about community piece. Like, we could also say, I mean, we don't have limit time, but like, of course, like, yeah, I need to like, what about my own time with the Lord? Very important.
Mhm.
Your own time with the Lord. I need to encourage you. You need to encourage me. That's great. But
Yes.
in the context of what we're talking about, marriage, you gotta like go together and again, for those that are hurting or struggling, then just keep going, modeling that as opposed to, you know
Mhm.
what, it is a pretty day. Let's just stay home and I'll just read my Bible, maybe watch it on
Watch it online.
watch it online.
Yeah,
And
sure.
like, yeah. And like, wow, nothing's changing and we're still struggling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, so important. No, I really appreciate that. So, church has been like a constant theme, I think, in a lot of the couples that I talk to in so many ways. So definitely one of those foundational pieces that you just can't speak enough of how influential it can be, for sure. All right, what is the next one? I was going to say number 2, but it's not a countdown. Okay, it's not a countdown, but
I would say
the
family. You know, we
Yeah.
go family.
family. Okay, so first of all, like, what do you mean a little bit by? So this is the second of the top 4 or the second of the top 4 things that couples struggle with, and you're saying family. So what do you mean by that?
Right. And to 4 things that oftentimes lead to marriages that end. Like, these are the topics that tend to derail, make life difficult, and frankly, this is why people divorce. So,
Family.
yeah, family. Well, multifaceted, but I'll just say what usually gets people in the most trouble is um, unspoken expectations. Hey, communication about children. Where one may feel like I want to have lots, and the other one's like I'm thinking 1 or under. Um, and
Yeah.
we never talk about that. And so, like, yep,
Yeah.
let's get into marriage. Well, now we're into marriage, and we possibly might not be on the same page. Now, in our story, we just talked about this last night. We didn't have a number or expectation, although it's kind of funny when we
He's from a family of 2.
Yep.
And I'm from a family of 5. So we're
Okay.
coming from, but he's also from a believing family and I'm not. Like I was not brought up in a Christian home. So,
Okay.
our upbringings were
But those do
pretty
have
different.
influences.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
pretty
for
different.
sure.
We were in the delivery room having our second son, and I, in my mind, not spoken, was just like, "Whoa, wow, this might be it. This might be the end." Like, I just really
Yes.
want to, like, embrace it all, like, soak it in.
Yeah.
And as soon as our second born was delivered, she's thinking, "Oh, can't wait to do this again." Like, let's have it.
Weird, I know, but I just think
Which,
that.
like I was like, she's like, I'm ready to move on to number 3. And so it's like, whoa, we already had, some divergence there, right?
Yes.
Unspoken. Um,
And he wasn't thinking, I don't want to have any more. He was just thinking,
thinking like,
I have,
it just seemed like a natural
yeah.
endpoint. And
Right.
so I think in our case, we held the whole topic very loosely and we kind of let things fall as they may.
And we were basically on the same page when it was time, like I feel like I'm ready to have another one. Oh, okay, and so that, that worked out. Now, number 5 was a bit of a surprise and was not necessarily something to be thrilled about at the time. Of course, now
Yeah.
he's wonderful and we would never wish him
Sure.
to not be here. But that
Jehovah
one,
Jireh,
that one
our
was a little
provider.
bit more like, I thought we were
Yeah.
done.
Right.
Yes.
So that caused some stress. And God was very good, and I knew it will be wonderful, and I will love him, but I don't want to do this again. But then in time, saw the
Yeah.
goodness of it. But that did
For
cause
sure.
a little bit of stress in our lives at the time. Damon was opening a new office, and I was pregnant with our 5th kid and homeschooling, and it was a lot.
It was a lot.
It was a
Yeah.
lot at once,
For sure.
So that was really hard, but
Yeah.
we were, I mean, I was one of those people that always wanted to be a mom. Like, that's just what I knew I always wanted to do. And I know
Yeah.
not everybody feels that way. And it's way harder
Yeah.
when you, really want to have a career, or you have these other great aspirations of things you want to do. Like, I knew from a very young age that I want to be a mom. So
Yep.
I got
Yep.
to do what I wanted, which was great.
That's awesome.
Right. So that I mean, in that same vein, Andy,
Communication.
communication
Yeah.
and expectations. Like,
Right.
if your life story was one like, I want to have this professional career, but I want you to be at home, and I
Yeah.
want you to be a raiser of children, lots of children, and like, whoa,
Right.
big clash, and now we've got conflict, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so these are why it's like, I'm not doing this, and that's when
Mhm.
people get off the bus.
And our boys are actually seeing that right now, who are looking for our 2 second and third, who are looking for spouses at this point in their lives, and really not necessarily wanting women who want these high powered careers. Not that they're
Mhm.
against women having careers, but wanting someone who wants to raise children,
Yeah.
and having a harder time finding that. But
Mhm.
his mom was at home, my mom was at home. That was something we discussed, that we wanted to have the kind of family where I didn't have to work and could stay home and not have,
Yes.
that sort of thing. Like, that was
Right.
important to us. And that is something that we discussed and,
Right.
both felt very strongly about.
Yeah. So I definitely appreciate that. It's so easy to just whenever you haven't examined your own assumptions and aspirations or what you
Oh, yeah.
want, it's so easy to just have them and not, and at some point then realize whenever that you want different things. Very incredibly easy to have that happen. For you all, how did you foster unity? What's like a decision or two that you made that really helped you foster a sense of unity, even when all of a sudden you realize, whoa, we kind of want different things here? What helped you foster unity in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because again, in our culture right now, there's a high priority on individualization. I get me, you get you. Let's be fair, 50-50. But in the Lord, it talks about this marriage of becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is, to be honest with you, like, but somewhat of an education of sorts that occurred before marriage, but like, here we are. And like that realization, like, okay, when you do this, you are becoming one. You cannot just like be, oil and water that happens to exist
Mm-hmm.
in the same vessel of
Yeah.
marriage. Like, it becomes one thing. And so when you ask about like, what are things that we've intentionally fostered, I think it honestly, it's that educational piece of like, what is true about marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and like, okay, well then we can't pretend it to be something else. Like, if we're going to call it marriage, well, then the two are going to become one. We've got to okay, we just got to figure out how we're going to become one, as opposed to, well, I want marriage, but this is how I want to define it. I want it to be coexistent, 50-50. What's
Mm.
mine is mine. What's yours is yours. Like that's a little bit off of what, has been traditionally spoken of in God's word. So I think part of it for us is,
Yeah.
just getting on board with like what is marriage, and so that
And,
oneness factor.
and I think
Yeah.
Damon's parents were really,
Well,
really good
sorry,
examples.
Andy, real quick. I want to come to you. Let me kind of summarize. I'm going to come to you next. But what you're saying, Damon, is this assumption that you can kind of see in the culture at places. But there's this assumption that if we can sort of be connected individuals, that can get us through marriage in a decent way or something. But what you're saying is that's actually a really unhelpful way to think about it, because you're saying we had to choose, like we have to figure out how not to be two individuals, but to actually like merge our lives in a way that actually creates not just like separate and equal kind of thing, but actually a unity.
Yeah.
And the assumption that you had about what marriage is, that it is a unity, not a two people doing life in parallel, or like connected parallel, that was actually helpful. So it's like, well, we don't have a choice but to push towards each other until there is no distance. And so understanding what marriage is actually helped you sort of not accept this sort of equal but separate type of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. This may sound a little, but like almost like co-joined twins being brought together, like almost like we share so much of our, like, if I'm thinking a thought, like, or if I like slam my, thumb with a hammer, that she
Mm-hmm.
feels the pain, like there's so
Mm-hmm.
much that's where we want to go in
Yeah.
terms of that oneness, that, not like, well, I wouldn't want to like, slam my thumb with a hammer because it would hurt my spouse,
Yes.
or, and we
Yes.
could like spread that out, like, well, I'm making poor choices what I look at on the internet, or things that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
seem to be somewhat private are going to be like, it's just going to like affect or hurt, saying something, anyway, I
Yeah.
think we get the point, just where that, when we defined oneness, it's like, yeah, we're one. And so we've just got to figure this out. And so
Yeah. For sure.
it's
No, it's
more
good.
definition, holding to the definition of what is marriage.
What it was. Yeah. No, I think that's really helpful. Yeah. All right, Andy.
I
Yeah.
was just
Sorry to
going to
cut
say,
you off.
yeah, that his parents were a really good example. We spent a lot of time with them while we were dating and then in early marriage, and they had a great relationship, and were great examples of what a healthy marriage looks like and how people love and interact together and make decisions and all that. And they really enjoyed each other. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was, to me, not growing up with that was just so eye-opening. Like, this is
Yeah.
amazing and this is what I want. And so it was easy to then model kind of after them.
So
For
for
sure.
those, in our listening audience here who may like, yeah, I had that too. That's amazing. Good for you. I didn't have that. Well, then I would go try to find adoptive parents,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that might be in your church group or whatnot, to like, I want to follow you guys. Tell me, like, let me just, can I like watch you, or can I spend time
Right.
with you and
Right.
see how you do it? Like,
Yeah.
model or find those people in your lives that already exist that you
Yeah,
can.
definitely. And that, I don't know if I mentioned this, but that's actually one of the reasons that I started this podcast. Is in the couples that I work with, a lot of them were saying, we didn't have good examples of how to do this, right? And so that's part of the reason that I want to get wise and loving couples to like tell their story. How did we do this? That kind of thing. Now, a podcast is no substitution for an actual
Substitute for
couple.
Right.
flesh on flesh.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean,
Yes. So
food,
point well
sharing
taken for
food,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah. All right, we are. Let's do one more of the top four. We'll call it. It became the top three, but what is your? So yeah,
We have
what is like
finances
the
and sex. What
finance?
do you want to do?
Finance. Finance and
Well-
sex; those are hot button issues. So what do you want to do?
So let's do intimacy.
Okay.
Because that's what the people want to hear. But I'll just say a quick touch on finances. It actually parallels with family a lot, like just expectations, where one may have an expectation, let's have a big house, let's go into debt. The other one's like, I don't like debt. I'm scared. Money scares me. And so again, it gets back to communication. I would hang out with people that are modeling it well. So I'll just leave it at that. Just a quick little added of the,
Yeah, for sure.
I'm more the spender, you're more the saver. That's actually a good thing, a good balance. Because if we were both spenders, we'd be broke. If we were both savers, so all right, intimacy,
Communication.
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 What do you know? Amazing. That's the answer to everything. So let's just start at the very beginning again. Going into marriage, expectations, right?
Yeah.
Where one may be like, I've been waiting for this all my life. This is going to be a daily occurrence, right? And
Right.
the other one may be like, wow, I just like companionship. I just want to hold hands and cuddle. And it's like,
Right.
wow. I'm sure it'll all work out. We'll figure it out on the other side. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Just
right.
nature will take over. And then it does and doesn't. And I know there's a lot of people that I say struggle in this, like majorly struggle.
Yeah.
And I mean, we even had a couple, again, not naming any names, that they got married
Mhm.
and they never consummated the marriage because she had like major fear issues. That was like, pressed down from a mom. And, a lot of the guidance was like, do not get married, do not get married. Yeah, they got married.
Mhm.
And it was like, I'll do this a couple of times to have children. And it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
all the red flags were there, but so, obviously that did not work out.
They did not stay together.
They did not stay together for very long. But like, well, that's an extreme case, but what about the silent, quiet things that we all kind of struggle with? It does come back to communication. So
Yeah. And actually, quick, if I can, quick story about like sometimes my wife and I actually we did a lot of enough probably premarital work, and I remember we made a promise to each other that we like promised that we would have sex twice a week or whatever, right? And there was like a number that we had. And then, a few years, of course, that didn't work. And a few years into marriage, we were doing marriage counseling, and I brought that up as like, I was struggling with that at one. I was like,
hey, remember this promise?
yeah. I was like, we promised to each other, and like, so I brought that up to the counselor, and and the counselor laughed at me, like. like whatever, kind of you didn't know what you were talking about, like you didn't kind of thing. And so
I would even say the counselor was giggling because like, wow, I'm struggling with the exact same thing.
maybe.
It was more of a nervous giggle of like, yeah, what were you thinking? Like I'm thinking the same thing.
Yeah. My point is like, even it comes back to what you were saying earlier, that the gospel makes us people of love. And what I had to learn through that is, what intimacy is a bigger subject than sex. And I need to become a person who can pursue her and love her, even when it sort of feels like I'm not getting what I need or whatever. and then go from there. And that, in the end, that actually helped improve our sex life. But I had to become a more loving person. And the focus was on me and my heart is kind of why even when you communicate about it, you might have to re-communicate about it, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And you go through seasons.
Yep.
When you have young kids, especially for the wife, I mean, it's just, people are on you all day. You're like, please don't touch me.
Right,
but then
right,
you have
right.
to think, but
Yeah.
this is part of the relationship and it's necessary. So sometimes, you do have to keep recommunicating and reevaluating and as your seasons change, your seasons of life, because it is going to change.
For sure. So
That's a great analogy, just the season piece, because as you age, things change in your body, and so expectations, needs, wants, and there's nothing wrong with having like a goal or even a schedule. I mean, like I know some people are like, well, that just doesn't seem very romantic. I'm like, okay, but how's that working for you? in terms of, it's just got to be, rose petals and perfumes and
romantic
and romantic, candlelight and
right.
and that sort of thing. Like that is an unspoken expectation. That's an unrealistic expectation to expect. Okay, maybe for the honeymoon, maybe for anniversaries. But
sure.
Again, we again bobbing back to the surface is communication. What I want. And if I don't communicate that, that's usually where breakdowns happen.
Where
And
breakdowns happen,
again,
right.
in that oneness pact, going back to oneness, like I'm not feeling it, but they are. And so I need to maybe help in that. And I get it, like, well, hey, what about my own wants? And we'll talk about it. Like let's talk about it. Like there's no rules against that. And if anything, there's nothing more refreshing. There's nothing more refreshing than when your spouse says, "Not that," and either here's a why, and not just like lame excuse, like I got, but like, okay, like that really takes the pressure out of the room. Lets out air out of the balloon. And just like, okay, thank you for letting me know.
And honestly, at this stage of our life, scheduling has actually made it so much less stressful and better and easier, and expectations and all that. And that's just been the last several years, and it's made a huge difference. Honestly.
That's great. Yeah.
So
don't be afraid of
that. There
You'll
you go.
us
I love
later.
it.
But we don't have little kids, so there is that.
Right. I think the thing that sticks out to me about that is communicating through the seasons. And okay, it's good to have goals, but I think the picture that you're painting is, one, you have to understand how important it is. Two, you have to be flexible with how you serve each other in it. Three, seek to serve each other, I think is that's the feeling that I'm getting from you guys. Is that
Totally.
For sure.
And sometimes, one person is stronger and more able to do the serving than the other, and it kind of switches back and forth,
Yeah.
And that's important.
For sure. Cool. Well, Damon and Andy, thank you so much. I have to let you go, but this has been really helpful. I love the hearing a little bit of your story and how you have essentially taken these topics, which, like I said, all of these topics are on the top reasons for why couples get divorced, and you have figured out how to serve each other in it, communicate through it, how to basically, in a sense, divorce-proof your relationship. So I really appreciate it. I think it's really helpful. Thank you for being here so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take care.
I really hope you found that helpful. Don't forget, get your copy of The 7 Deadly Sins of Marriage Communication. There's a link in the description. Also, please leave me a review on the platform that you're listening to this on. And also, what are you struggling with in your marriage? Leave me a comment, and I would love to see what I can do to make some content and help with your questions. Thanks so much, and let's build a life-giving marriage.